Hello, how are you all on this beautiful Sunday here in Australia? Other parts of the world, other times, but we're going to discuss into owning the darkness, owning your darkness within, and the difference between that and really harmful unconscious behavior. I feel like sometimes in this tantric world, and as people really begin to awaken the animal and awaken the emotional body, the biggest part of that is bringing consciousness down into the animal. And sometimes the differentiation between this wild, free self and this very clear, logical self can actually grow more apart or can grow in more synergy. So part of the things we'll be discussing today is how we can actually bring consciousness and our animal, our emotional body into more synergy, to really, go away from some of the unconscious kind of, you could say, bad behavior that just actually creates more trauma and more abuse. But it's good to awaken that dark side, but finding some of those differentiating points.
Yeah, so I guess what I see a lot of in Tantra and is this space of, I'm just expressing my Kali, or I'm expressing my anger and I should be able to do that. Or in the more kind of love and light spirituality in some yoga communities, it's like I'm just watching my anger. And I feel like when there's an overemphasis on consciousness and awareness, there's a denial of the animal. And it's just like, no, that the animal doesn't exist. And then in Tantra, what can happen sometimes is that it's overemphasized, the animal space. And it's like, running animalistic energy with a disregard to consciousness. So sometimes what can happen is people who are very conscious and very aware and who have denied their animal for a long time, when their animal starts to come online and when they're given permission to, really allow their emotional body to vibrate and to be seen and to be heard, then it's this rampage, the animal's out of the cage and it's like, well, I want to have sex and I'm angry, or I feel this or I feel that, and it gets projected. And then, likewise the other way, it's like, oh no, I'm just observing, I'm just watching. And either way, when either consciousness or animal is denied, what we have is an imbalance. So owning your darkness isn't about being angry at people and imposing sexual energy onto people. Owning your darkness is being able to run energy this way, dark energy this way, so it's actually connecting to consciousness. So when you feel angry, you can run it through your body. When you feel sexual energy, you can run it through your body, and then you can be discerning and attuned as to when you allow yourself to be seen in that, or when you're sharing that energy.
Yeah, and I feel like what happens for a lot of people, and I see this, is they come into their darkness, they actually find their animal for the first time, they find their emotional body, and then there's this denial of consciousness. There's a denial of truly like being aware and attuned, and there's just this, well, I'm in my animal now and I can be free and I cannot actually have attunement to the rest of the world. And the place really where I think I found in my own journey is when I remember that time and I was like, I am wild, I am free, I can do whatever I want. And when I could begin to actually correlate that and have awareness of the world around me, especially when I'm moving that darker, kind of more dense energy, then it starts to integrate more. And the result usually is this, the heart actually begins to expand, because the consciousness is kind of dropping down and the animal, the emotional body is coming up, and it's meeting at that place of the heart. And there's just a lot of love that is exuded from that. But the challenge is that often consciousness doesn't want to let go of control, animal doesn't want to let go of control, so it can create more and more separation in the way in which you're interacting and connecting with the world. And I think the biggest key point when you're beginning to move that darker energy is actually recognizing how your energy is impacting another. And that's where the difference between the conscious and the unconscious happens, is I can be very dark and very strong and very forceful, but I'm very much attuned to how that is impacting the individual that I'm playing with, that I'm interacting with. And if I have no care, then I'm just as bad as any all of the other trauma and the, you know, the pillaging and the raping and the destroying in the world. But if I can actually run that energy, which is a really challenging, difficult energy in some ways to run, because it's the most pushed down and suppressed and chastised energy in the world, but to actually let it move through the cells and come alive through the being is where, like, full radiant sexual energy, as Shan was saying, we're running it up and down, and we can move that, and we can come alive and use our darkness, use our lightness to be more alive and more full and more vibrant into our world.
Yeah, and I think the key here is that there's a difference between dark energy and shadow energy and evil energy. And people say it's oh, that person's so dark. And if they're, you know, very vexatious or they project anger a lot, that's shadow dark. It's like someone who really owns their darkness. It's very different to shadow dark is unconscious, and it's often when actually you can't own your darkness, so it comes out in the shadow. So someone who actually can't own that they're angry, rather than just feeling the anger and what it's showing them, or they can't own that they feel shame or guilt, or, you know, some of those lower, denser energies, depression, whatever it is, rather than owning that, listening to that, feeling what it's telling them needs to change in their life, then they project it onto other people. And this, you know, this happens all the time. And I really want to say, it's like, you're not owning your darkness if you impose on someone's boundaries. You're not owning your darkness if you're throwing your sexual energy around everywhere. You're not owning your darkness if you're raising your voice and getting angry and dominating with someone. You're being a fucking jerk, right? Or you're being a bitch. And you're actually not able to own your darkness. You're bypassing your own emotional body. You're bypassing your own sexual body. And then in points when you get triggered and the unconscious is much more available to you, then it's all vomiting and spewing out. So, you know, I mean, if you feel like you're someone who has a lot of awareness and a lot of consciousness, then my suggestion to you would be that next time you meditate, really do some somatic inquiry into, is there some anger in here? Is there some frustration in here? And give that some breath, sound, and movement. Don't wait for when you're pissed or when someone really triggers you. Actually feel those energies alive in you. So often people who are very polarized in their awareness and consciousness, they're people who are also polarized in the mind and in the masculine. So it's much easier for them to go into logic and rationality and into the doing and direction, rather than the feeling and the mystery and the deeper realms of these darker energies. So, you know, it's like, it's easy to penetrate, it's easy to direct, but it's not so easy to be receptive. So my suggestion for those people is to really get more in touch with your emotional, sensual body and take some time every day to feel. And for the people who get very lost in the emotional body and, you know, tend to just blow up everywhere, then it's like, spend some time just being in stillness and watching and observing and feeling that space of nothingness and void that's beyond the story. And, you know, we all can fluctuate into both. I know that there are times when my emotional body is more taking the lead, or my awareness is more taking the lead. And I always know that by what I'm doing in moments of trigger. It's like, in those trigger moments, am I polarizing too much in the mind and trying to rationalize everything and watch everything? Or am I polarizing too much in the emotional body and blowing up and exploding? And then whatever I notice, I really try to balance that out. And when they balance out, they meet at the center of the heart. And the heart, that's where owning your darkness really is. It's like when you are aware of what's moving here and you are honoring yourself with consideration for others. So I'll just say one more thing, which is that, no, I'm just aware that I'm talking a bit now. It's like, I really want to emphasize that the path of Tantra or any spiritual path, it's not about becoming a selfish fucking asshole or bitch who takes what they want and who vomits over everybody. That is not what it's about. That's not what owning your darkness is about. What it's about is realizing that you are love, you are freedom, that you don't need to be a people pleaser. You don't need to sacrifice your real desires. You have a right to feel your fears. And within that, you also have attunement and awareness and consideration of others, because the heart is so alive that everything is one and you're remembering that space. And in that space, there's respect, but there's also the capacity to set healthy boundaries, say what you need, and honor yourself, because you know yourself. You know, owning your darkness is knowing yourself. It's knowing those parts of you that need something, and it's also knowing those parts of you that are not okay with certain things happening.
And I love what you say about the boundaries. There's a great discussion we did probably a month or so ago on boundaries. We'll put in the links here for you to check out. But the boundaries is really where you can begin to own your own space of sovereignty. And especially when you're starting to play with this energy, the tendency is to want to almost have power over another individual. Because a lot of society, it's like to really like be strong, there's a sense of, well, I need to like be in control over others. And the sense of owning darkness and really owning that deep power from the heart, as we're both speaking about, is really like power with. It's not power over. And in the moment that you're in a situation and you're trying to exude your power over someone, recognize that the person you're trying to exude your power over is actually the one in control. And if you can recognize that flip of the conscious awareness and feel what's present underneath that, of what is the validating desire you have to try to put power over someone, and actually feel the deep level of uncomfortability. And I know that even for myself, like there's times when I get triggered and I'm like, I want everything to put shame on that other person for making me upset. And then I can have power over, but that's not true darkness. The true darkness comes in when I can move my emotional body, come back into a place of rest and digest and be there, and then actually have power with that's exuding from like the strength of my heart in through and through this other being. And that's where this practice gets juicy and fun, and it's like and safety is created, because the moment that one person has an agenda, or the moment that, and this is whether it's in the bedroom, in the boardroom, whatever's happening, the moment agenda is present, then the agenda is indicating I need to have power over to feel good about myself. So to take away that agenda means that I can actually just meet power with this other person, and I can meet and synergize and play, and I can be completely congruent and alive to the boundaries that are present inside of the playing field. And be responsive and attuned and actually listening. If I'm not listening to the individual that I'm meeting and I'm playing with, and again, this is bedroom etiquette, this is boardroom etiquette, this is everywhere.
And communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And that communication is where like it actually comes into aliveness, into applicability into life. And without that applicability, then none of this really even applies. We can just have these conversations. So the next time you find yourself in that place of wanting to have power over, recognize that it might not necessarily be the darkness that you're exemplifying. It's just your ego trying to validate itself.
And it's shadow darkness, right? So the shadow, if you don't know how to own your shadow, your darkness is going to be in shadow, right? And the best way to own your darkness is to actually listen to the people who love you, because your best shadow reflectors, and shadow just means anything that's unconscious, and that's where true power is making what's unconscious conscious, is shining the light of awareness onto those unconscious parts of you that are running your life and that are sabotaging it or creating harm to others. So often people will tell you when you're harming them, or when you're hurting them, or when you're not showing up in ways that are respectful, or when you're not attuning to them. And the question is, can you actually listen when someone is reflecting to you where your behavior is going unconscious? So whether the shadow is that you're controlling, or you're greedy, or you're lazy, or you're not contributing enough, or that you're enmeshing too much, or that you're avoiding, whatever it is, what often happens when people get a shadow reflection, especially from their partners or from their mum or their dad, you know, you're not calling me enough, I don't feel important, is a typical one from my mum that I rejected for a long time until I actually listened and thought, you know what, I'm not calling her enough. And, you know, I used to just defend myself and say, oh, well, I'm busy and da-da-da, but how long does it take to make a call? Or, you know, a reflection I've had from partners is that I can be controlling, and then I would defend that until I just stopped the defending and the deflecting when people reflected to me. And now every time someone shares something with me, it doesn't even matter if 80% of what they're saying isn't factual. It's like, what can I feel from this person? And could that actually be true? And that's where the power lies. That's where the power in the dark lies, when you can actually own your shit. Owning your darkness is owning your shadows. And then once you become aware of those shadows, actually giving them what they need and growing in power. So for more about shadow work, I've got an online course called Ignite Your Power. I strongly suggest that if you have issues with power, if you get strong reflections around your anger, around your emotional body getting projected, if you have strong reflections that you're always bypassing and you know, like not really being there with people, whatever it is, it's like if you're ready to integrate, if you're ready to own your shadow, if you're ready to own your darkness and become more mature with the way that you're running these energies so that you're living from the consciousness of the adult and not the unconscious child, then this course is fantastic for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I love listening to you.
I love listening to you too.
So, yeah, this is a light taste, a flavor, and if any of this speaks to you, if there's questions, or if you're having challenges owning your own shadows and really owning your own darkness, and this is some of what maybe is being reflected back to you in your relating, in your business negotiations, etc., come reach out to us. There's lots of things happening when really the essence of so much of this work is bringing the unconscious conscious, and that's what we're doing a lot in these retreats and workshops. So, and
owning your shit instead of shitting it all over everyone.
Don't be a douchebag. So we'll put some links. We have a beautiful Living Tantra retreat coming up in Bali in May. Just
3 spots left.
3 spots, yes. And then at the end of the month here in Perth, for those women, there's a Art of Loving Men. So, and lots of other stuff happening, but those are the 2 exciting ones. So
yeah, and I'll put a link to my online course, Ignite Your Power, which is all about shadow work, and that's really the core of what we're talking about is shadow work. So enjoy.
Yay, love you all.